This episode of The Unstarving Musician is powered by liner notes. Learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry professionals I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician on topics such as marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, and much more. Sign up for liner notes at unstarvingmusician.com. It's an email newsletter from yours truly in which I share some of the best knowledge gems garnered from the many conversations featured on The Unstarving Musician. You'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and liner notes subscriber exclusives. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabanzo. This is my podcast. It features conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals, all intended to help indie music artists better understand the marketing, business, and creative processes that empower us to do more of what we love, make music. Welcome to another episode. How's your day? How's your weather? Are you happy or are you sad? If you're sad, get out early tomorrow morning and let the sunlight, bathe your naked eyeballs. No, don't stare at the sun, but seriously, try it. Get some sunlight on your eyes. Don't wear your UV protection sunglasses. Try it. I think you'll be happy, but I hope you're happy today, right now. I'm excited for my guest in this episode, Cranston Dean. His very recent release sounds super good, and he's in the throes of promoting it, so I'm happy this episode dropped today, or is dropping in the super near future as I record this. On a housekeeping note, no new episode next week. I'm traveling for my 29th wedding anniversary. 34 years together. Amazing, right? I still love her like the day I met her. She's definitely my best girl. I've been working without internet since yesterday afternoon. Normally, I just tether to my phone, but I had to lend it to my best girl because her phone service has been out, different carrier than mine. It's all a little inconvenient, but I'm still able to work on this intro for you and this episode for you. I can also practice for some vocal and drum recordings I have coming up. That's what we do when technology fails us, right? We work around, maybe enjoy the time offline. There could be some afternoon day drinking in my future, though. I'm just saying. Hey, I was recently in the Working Musician Podcast episode 175. I think you should check it out. The host, David Pedrick, did a great job of teasing out the evolution and history of The Unstarving Musician, my endeavors in music, my recordings, things that have kept me in good gigs, and I think it's all stuff that can help you. It's a great podcast, by the way, even if you don't check out my episode, but I think you should. You should check out the Working Musician Podcast. It's really cool. And I will put a link in the show notes for that. And you should also check out last week's episode of this podcast. It was with Julieta Heredia, if you're a gringo. Or at least check out her band, Fin del Mundo. They're great, and Julieta is really cool. I enjoyed talking with her. And so is my guest, Cranston Dean, the guy with the last name for a first and a first for a last. It's messing me up a lot as I was getting ready for this. Anyway, he's a singer-songwriter. He is a New Jersey native whose music draws from Americana, folk, jazz, country, blues, pop, and soul. He sees songwriting and performing as a way to translate and transform the human condition into beautiful works of art. Cranston's solo tours have taken him throughout the mid-Atlantic to Nashville and north through New England and the coast of Maine. In the summer of 2017, he supported his fourth studio album with a tour that spanned Chicago, Minnesota, Washington, Oregon, California, and Colorado. West Coast, basically. And I don't have that album name in front of me, I'm so sad to say, because I'm offline, because I have no internet today. Thank you, Telmex. Telmex, have you heard them? I'm in Mexico. In case you didn't know that. That's where I live. In case you didn't know that. In case you care. But anyway, that album was named one of New Jersey Music's 17 Best Albums of 2017 by New Jersey Advanced Media. He was educated at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia as a jazz pianist. Cranston is the 2017 and 2016 Asbury Park Music Award winner as Top Male Acoustic Act, and the winner of the 2015 Asbury Park Music Award as Top Multi-Instrumentalist. So yeah, he's pretty talented. Cranston has an album release show at Asbury Lanes. It should have an H in there, like Ashbury, but it's Asbury. Maybe they say Ashbury, I don't know. Anyway, that is happening on May 28th, which is in the very near future as I record this episode, but you might be listening in the not so near future. So anyway, if you missed it, I'm sorry. But that new album is called Northern Town, and it dropped on his birthday this past May 11th, so happy belated birthday, Cranston. In this conversation, Cranston and I talk about the influence small town living and jazz has had on his music, the recording of Northern Town, his new album, how he got his start in songwriting, the value of open mic performance, recording studio lessons that helps him record now from home, and more. Cranston and I were introduced by Joshua Van Ness of the WAG, who has also been on this podcast, and whose episode number I also don't have in front of me because, again, no internet. But it was a pretty recent episode. You can just go to unstarvingmusician.com and look for Joshua Van Ness or the WAG, one of the bands he's in, his main band. He's also a cool guy. You should check that one out. Cranston was a fun interview. Super nice guy. Talented as heck. I like his new album. I really do. I hope you'll enjoy our conversation. Here is me talking with Cranston Dean. Are you located at your home base today in, what's it called? Atlantic what?
Atlantic Highlands.
Is that where you are today?
That's where I'm at today. Yep.
Cool. Is that where you grew up?
Yep. That's where I grew up, and I work in the area doing construction, and I do a lot of playing in the area too. So yeah, home base for sure.
Oh, wow. Wow. What was it like growing up there?
It was very small towns. Uh, Atlantic Highlands is 1 square mile, and its neighbor Highlands is another square mile, and we both go to the same high school and middle school, which is all one encompassing thing. And I graduated with 60 kids between the two towns in a public school. So very small towns, but also you could see New York City from them. They're not right across from New York City, but you can see the city across the bay, and then it's also right at the start of the Jersey Shore. So the first beach that you'll get to in New Jersey, you'll go right through Atlantic Islands right before you get there.
Wow. Sounds pretty cool, like an unusual view from
Definitely an interesting view. Yeah.
Wow. Did that upbringing have notable impact on your music?
I think the small town upbringing definitely did. I mean, when I say, there's 5,000 people in each of these communities, but people really do get to know each other because a lot of people work, live, grew up in the area. So there's, for being two very small towns in the middle of New Jersey suburbia, they're both kind of the last of the dying small town America. They're the last of it.
Wow, yeah. I talked to a guy, I guess it's been about a week, maybe a couple of weeks, and he's from, I'm forgetting the name of the city, but it was the first city in in Pennsylvania. And he said it's about to lose its status as a city. And
Oh no,
yeah,
it can't be Philly. Maybe
nah,
Pennport or something.
it's named after the university he went to. I may find it here in a minute, and if you're just out of curiosity, but
Yeah.
I think it's called Chester, actually.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
Chester and Westchester. They're a little bit southwest of Philly.
Yep, he went to school at Westchester University.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school in Philly at University of the Arts, and So Westchester wasn't too far, and there was always some Westchester people that we'd know from the music circles around there. So
That sounds great. And you studied music there? You studied
I
jazz?
studied jazz over there. Yep.
Wow. I've listened to some of your music very recently, and the stuff I've listened
Listen.
to, I have to ask, does the how does the jazz influence whether and it may have like I wouldn't have noticed it like just in the playing style, but how do you feel like those studies or that background influences what you've done musically?
I think allowing, not allowing, but giving space for the other musicians you're playing with to kind of fill in their spot as much. I've never been like, here's the bass part, play this bass part. It's kind of always brought my songs to a group of musicians I trusted, and then whatever they come up with. So the improv part of jazz definitely factors into that. I do like crunchy harmonies sometimes, and obviously there's a lot of dissonance in jazz. Dissonance and consonance is everything. I would also say that I have a lot of solo sections in my songs, and that's certainly coming from the jazz world of letting people rip. I've started playing with like trumpet players and guitar players from jazz school. So, of course, they're going to want to take a solo. They were killing for that.
I know they kind of wait. I was watching a jazz fusion ensemble earlier this week. Amazing drummer. They were all really good players. It was um, a keyboardist, bass guitar, and drums. And the drummer, I'm a drummer. You may or may not have read that, but he stole the show, man. He was so good, and he was playing with some really good guys. But a little later in the evening, I was watching some other ensembles come on. It was like a benefit thing, and I was watching the horn players, just kind of hanging out, waiting for their moment.
Always waiting. I mean, I love horns, but I can find horn players to be sometimes strange, a strange breed of people. I don't understand horn players as much as I get rhythm section people in general
That's
because they're
funny.
always waiting. I
That's
love
funny.
them. No shade on the horns.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you know Joshua Van Ness and Alicia Van Sant? I just noticed they both have a Van in their name, and no relation.
I didn't put that together until right then. Well, I know Joshua from just playing, well, both of them from just playing around the New Jersey area. Joshua plays in as most drummers do. I also play drums in two other bands, and so yeah, drummers. I'm sure like Joshua and yourself are in very high demand. If I, a singer songwriter who happens to play the drums, am in too, I feel like real deal drummers are very busy people. So I've seen Josh perform in a number of settings, and yeah, just our Jersey music community. Have you spent a lot of time in New Jersey? Or?
None. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I think I spent a night to have Italian food there many, many years ago.
Nice, you're on the
I,
right track.
yeah, I think I was. Well, I was in town on business, and I believe that a friend told me about a restaurant in New Jersey, and so I picked up a taxi back in those days. It was an expensive taxi ride too, um, and I thought I'll never find this place, and it was very strange. I got out of the taxi in this very foreign world to me. I grew up in, and at that point in my life, had spent most of my life in the Dallas Fort Worth area. So this was like very different, and it was nighttime. And I walked out, and I must have taken just a few steps, and there was the restaurant. So I had a nice time. I was by myself. It was pretty cool.
Well, I hope the restaurant was worth the big cab ride.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a good experience. I could never find it again. I think I've lost touch with the person that told me I had to go there, so I just took her word for it and went. A coworker.
Hey, thanks, coworker.
Yeah,
Thanks for
yeah.
sending him our way.
No
Yeah, New
kidding.
Jersey's this weird place that it is a long, small state, much like our small little towns that I'm from. They're very, very close knit, and you kind of end up knowing a lot of people. I say very often that there's 6 degrees of separation in the world, but only three in New Jersey, because you always end up running into somebody that knows somebody else, or it's a bizarre thing. But for musicians, it's even smaller in New Jersey. So yeah, with Joshua, just knowing him from playing around the state for years now.
But you guys do have a relatively solid music scene there, or not really in the town that you're at? You kind of got to go a few blocks, metaphorically speaking.
In the town I'm from, it's very small again, so there's not as many people around playing music. However, I do think that there are some notable musicians in our area. We got this guy Clutch Cabin, who's kind of like a indie emo, produces his own stuff. We have some folk punk from our buddy Kevin Daly. This band I play in, Patty C. He is like kind of surf Jack Johnson-y kind of music. And Mercury Brothers is another like rock and roll band that they do a lot of playing out of Highlands. And so there's definitely bands and things happening, but Asbury Park is the main hub in my part of New Jersey, and we get people from the county below us, Ocean County, as well as people from northern Monmouth County, where I'm from, and so it pulls a lot of people in together from all over the place in Asbury Park. That's definitely a big hub. New Brunswick's another hub, and yeah, it's a very easily navigable state as well. So that makes it very easy for South Jersey musicians to start mingling with North Jersey people and Central Jersey people, because Central Jersey is a real place that is highly debated in New Jersey, if you were unaware.
I I was. Well, it sounds good. At first, I was like, wow, I'm imagining the typical commute to a gig outside the area, but it sounds like, as you say, it's navigable, and you are able to connect with other musicians there. And I mean, when I listen to you, you sound like you play, you write music like, and you perform like someone who has not had too much trouble connecting with other musicians. But when I hear small town, I start thinking of a couple places I've lived in my lifetime and thinking, oh, that must be hard. But it's very dense there geographically, right?
Yes, my particular small town, I guess, functions more like a neighborhood in a city in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a spread out part of the city, but the whole county and I think the whole state is it kind of functions that way, that small towns become, that's your neighborhood, except for you get to have a little more say of who's in charge of your neighborhood.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a nice thing. So you have an album release show coming up pretty soon, don't you?
Yes, I have an album that comes out on May 11th called Northern Town, and
Wow,
we're doing the album release show at a really nice venue in Asbury Park called Asbury Lanes, and that's going to be on May 28th.
nice.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at my production calendar, but we might actually get this out before then, and uh,
Well,
and if
that
not, it'll be tail end, promotion for.
oh, that's great. And if not, whoever's listening, the album's out.
Yeah,
Some
future listeners.
hey, future people.
Wow, May 11th is the day after my birthday. I'll have to like remember that your album's coming out so I can look for it.
May
That
11th is actually my birthday, and this year I was just like, let's put an album out on this album cycle. I was like, let's just do it on the birthday and just see if that helps any getting people to
wow,
listen.
wow, what a coincidence! And I just
So
talked.
happy almost birthday, friend.
Yeah, same to you. Funny enough, I was a guest on another musician podcast this morning, and the host, his birthday's May 5th, so I was kind of laughing about that, but here you are like the day after.
Yeah, we're right next to each other.
That is
Maybe.
amazing. So you probably also, well, no, you probably escaped the whole Mother's Day thing. I was looking at the calendar, I was born in Texas, and so the U.S. Mother's Day thing, it kind of moves around to that specific Sunday. And the year I was born, I was actually born on Mother's Day, which my mother did not remember, but I was like, my poor mom. But I always run into that, like, hey, I'm having a party like the weekend of my birthday. Well, it's Mother's Day again, and, that, or I used
I,
to anyway.
I've definitely, and me and my mother joke like, oh, well, we're not lined up this year, but another year or two we'll be celebrating on the same day.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. So yeah, that's right. You do run into it because it's a moving target. And so I live in Mexico now, and in Mexico anyway, Mother's Day is always specifically on the 10th, on my birthday. So I'm going to see some family in the northern part of the country the week of my birthday, but I made sure not to plan anything on my birthday because it's like a worthless day for me to try to get together. Well, I mean, I could, it would be fine, but it would be all about, the mothers and not
Yeah.
me.
And it's no offense to you and no offense to me when it happens to me, but eh,
Yeah.
we would, at the end of the day, I think birthdays could be more of a celebration for your mother anyway. Like we should be giving that person gifts. Like thanks for I'm enjoying breathing air and drinking water. And so here's some gifts for you. So it makes sense. But if it's consistently on your birthday, I could see how you're just like, we are gonna find a different day.
There are worse days of the year in on the American holiday calendar to have your
Sure
birthday
are.
on. So all right. So your last album, it was Talk About That. Is that correct?
It's called When It Rains
I'm
was the last
sorry.
one. That's okay. Yeah, I have an album called When It Rains that came out in 2021. I have an album called High Beams that came out in 2017, one called Sarajevo in 2015, and Tried and True that was in 2014. And we just celebrated, or we're about to celebrate the anniversary of my first EP, which came out in 2013. So I've been at it for about 10 years now, making and recording music.
Amazing, amazing. Tell me how the new one is gonna be any different then, or maybe is drawing from past work that you've done.
The new one is most similar musically. I don't know which one. Maybe my second one or my third one. However, the way we recorded it is what I had the most fun doing this one because we just did it at home instead of going into a studio. We just put all of the equipment and gathered people I loved and just got after it. And then there wasn't that kind of ticking clock that happens when you're in a recording session and you when it's a paid session and the clock's going by and money is going out per hour. It does kind of tweak with you have to perform. But what if you don't always want to? Isn't it better to, if you could wait till the next day, do that? So that's kind of what we were trying to figure out. We'd done the first three in a big studio and, funding it ourselves. And what would it be like if we did this without having to hemorrhage all this money at the beginning of the cycle? And so I have a player on drums that I met in college named Shane Luckenbaugh. The bass player is named Patty C. Riley Shiro's on guitar, and Max Carmichael is a multi-instrumentalist that happens to play flute, banjo, bouzouki, octave mandolin, electric guitar. And I've all been friends with these guys for about 10 years. And so those are the players that I have on this album. So I was making it with people that I love very dearly, that I spend a lot of time with. I spend birthdays, we have cookouts all the time. We've been playing music together and recording together for years, but we got getting to do it around a couple dogs and oh, maybe I'm not really feeling this. Can we go to the next song? Or I'm not feeling it today. You want to come back to my part tomorrow and we'll move on to something else and just try to keep the productivity going and keep the fire stoked. That was for me the most fun I've had recording. So I plan on doing it that way as much as I can.
That's so cool. Having done the prior releases in studios. Did you find this first time around doing, an album at home? Did you find any challenges that you had to figure out how to deal with, or was it just easier altogether?
We went into it with the decision that if we hear creaks or the dog's collar goes a couple times shaking, that we weren't going to be upset by any of that. And we kind of wanted that. Like, if it was a windy night and the house is a bit creaky, that's okay. And so that made that part a little bit easier, trying to get perfect isolated audio. I don't know if that's necessarily the most important part. Is I think the energy and the musicianship being at its most comfortable and also most inspired, because you can't always go out there and be doing a triple double. It doesn't always happen that way, but it's okay because it's recording, so we don't have to take that take, which we tried to maximize on that. It was pretty easy because it was throughout the month of January in 2021, and at the time I was laid off from work just because there wasn't much work around. I still teach some lessons, but it was okay to have the month, and we just spent it recording. I was very fortunate to be able to do that, but we got to do that, and it wasn't really a hassle at all. So no, I don't think I faced any more hardships doing it that way.
Do you think that the prior studio experience lent itself to helping you with the doing this one at home, that just anything that you wouldn't have had in your tool belt otherwise?
Definitely, because having that, being under the gun and kind of, all right, time's ticking by, so we need to get this much done, or else we're spending this much more, guaranteed. Then if we have to come in tomorrow and do another day, it's not any skin off of whoever's recording you, off of their back, which is fine. It's a good business for them to be in. But they're so efficient with their time because they want to deliver a good product that is affordable to the people that they're working with. So I learned so many things from the fellow that produced the first three of them, and he's mixed the past two of them that we've been doing at home. His name's Pat Noon, and he's a great engineer, mixing person. He's just a wonderful person too. And I learned a lot of things. Have your tempos come in. If you are gonna use scratch tracks, record your scratch tracks ahead of time before the whole session starts. Just have them. You could sit there at that at home if you have GarageBand, or if you download any of the free digital audio workspaces that they have. You can come in with your tempo and know exactly what it's going to be for each song, and then also have a scratch take, because then you don't have to sit there until it's vocal take time playing the song and recording it, and kind of taking some, maybe not taking feeling out of it, but you kind of callous over some of the feeling by that repeated motion of doing it.
Mm.
So if you can get the scratch takes, you're comfortable with that. Great. Now the bass player and the drummer can go to that. What we did on this last one is I played the scratch tracks live with them, and then our goal was to take drums and the bass at the same time and try to keep the rhythm section very together and tight. That's what they were feeling in a moment together. So that should be what we're looking for in the drums and bass takes. And then we would run it 3 or 4 times until we figured which one we liked the best and move on to the next one. I think we did drums in a day, and most of the bass, doing it that way. And I learned that from doing it in the studio. So definitely doing things in the studio definitely helped. But if you know how to make it efficient for you and for the people that you record with, I think to anybody that's listening, trying to get into that sort of thing, I think it's worthwhile to try it. Why not?
Yeah, and perhaps someone listening is going to hear that and go, I never thought of that. Maybe someone who's new with home recording and never has and may never have a studio experience. So that's pretty cool. I like it. When I listen to some of your music, I kind of get an Americana vibe. Is it safe to say that you have some influences that also draw from rock and blues and maybe even soul?
Definitely on all of those levels. I mean, there was a time where James Brown was something that I listened to on a daily basis. And one of the albums I even tried to do that real high pitched scream thing. I love D'Angelo. Every single D'Angelo album is a national, if not world treasure, in my book. And so those kind of singers definitely work hand in hand with. I love Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings, and I love what Tyler Childers is doing. I love Sturgill Simpson and Wilco, and so like it's a happy. I try to find a happy blend of these many different directions. I love Irish and Scottish folk music, English folk music, American folk music, Canadian. I wish I spoke more languages than just English. I'm learning a little bit of Spanish. I work with a fellow from Chiapas,
Mm.
and he teaches me things, but a lot of the times they're not the most polite things to say. Um, so I'm trying to get him to teach me the polite ones next. But I just know that I'm missing out on a lot of stories by not knowing other languages and a lot of great ways of thinking about life.
I've been thinking about one of these days recording a song in Spanish, singing something in Spanish. And it had occurred to me, I think just in the last week, with Google Translate now that we can, and that so many, well, it's so easy to find lyrics that we may be able to get a fairly decent meaning just from doing that. And then if you have, like, your Spanish speaking friend or someone who can, like, listen to the song with you and help you go through it, like in my case, and I don't know if you would find yourself feeling comfortable doing something like this, since it sounds like your Spanish is at a kind of a beginner level and mine's not. My wife calls me fluent, but I'm fluent like a gringo. But um,
Hey, Gabacho.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, oh, I guess I could, because I wanted to listen to some Spanish songs because I have some other American and Canadian friends that have interest in doing some Spanish music, and I thought, well, I guess I could start by translating it, and I have the luxury of, because I do know the language at a pretty decent level. I can I can extrapolate when things aren't quite translating correctly, and then I have the bigger luxury of friends who can be like, "Oh no, what they actually mean is that." But yeah, I could see where you'd want that. Yeah, so you have a lot of influences that your music draws on, and it sounds to me like the way you talk about it and again with the little bit of your music that I've listened to, that there's never really been much of a challenge for you to balance all these genres in your songwriting. It kind of, as it sounds as though it may just come organically.
Yeah, I've always had a hard time when people ask like, "Oh, like what genre are you?" or like what do you sound like? I'm like, I don't know." And if I tell you this barrage of things, you'll be like, "Oh, okay, that doesn't help me at all." But I've also always felt like music is just music. It is the universal language. So I've never felt like pinned down to like a sound or that I was trying to like chase any one particular sound. There's definitely been sounds I've been like, oh, I want to write something that incorporates a little bit of that. And Yeah, I don't know. I can't put a genre marker on myself, and I think that is because a lot of these genres come in pretty naturally for one reason or another.
But don't you get compared to popular people once in a while, if not constantly?
Not much at all that I can think of. I mean, people will tell me like, "Oh, you remind me of this person," or I think August Burns Red was one, which is like I believe that's a Texas band, right?
I've not heard of them.
And I could be saying the wrong name as well, but it was like more of like an emo hardcore kind of direction.
Wow.
But then I've also got, like some of the country singers, or like Ray LaMontagne is one that I've got. I don't sing as sweetly and softly as he does, but yeah, I I don't get too many comparisons. My voice, I think, also sounds very strange. So anybody listening, just go check out my music and find out what I'm talking about.
You mentioned that you teach as well. Is that guitar predominantly, or do you teach other instruments?
Piano is what I went to school for, so piano, guitar, and voice. But I do use the piano. I try to make all my students learn a little bit of the piano, just kind of because they're buttons and they look the same every octave. I think everyone should know the piano a bit,
Right.
just enough to name the notes and mess around with your friends. Do 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 do. Just do that one for hours on end.
Right. Meditate on it.
Yeah,
How did you get started in songwriting?
I always loved songs. I guess I think that's where anybody gets started on it. But my friend Chris Clark, he was my best friend growing up, and he remains as my best friend. And we were playing music. We were playing a lot of covers together, and one day we sat down and we were like, we should write a song. And I couldn't play guitar at the time. And piano isn't cool when you're in high school, so I just had him play the guitar, and we wrote down lyrics together and wrote this song called "Cold New Jersey" because New Jersey's so cold and everything's so sad. I was very into emo music at the time. I'm no longer, but yeah, I got my start, I guess, with him, and we wrote songs together for the duration of high school, and then I went off to jazz school and did not particularly write songs because that's not what's encouraged, I think, in a lot of jazz schools. Or maybe it was, maybe I just projected that it wasn't.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. And then when I got out of jazz school, I was still living in Philadelphia, and there was an open mic hosted by a great songwriter named John Fay. He played in a band called the Caulfields out of Delaware back in the 90s, and he was just a great host and a great friend. And when I started going to his open mic, that's when I really started kicking it into to high gear. And I was playing with my buddy Shane, who's still the drummer with me in my band to this day. And we started playing around Philly down on South Street, and there's a place called the Boot and Saddle across from where we lived in on Ellsworth Street. And yeah, just kind of that was another kind of natural progression. I don't think there was like anything in particular that inspired me like, oh, now I got to write a song. I think songs were always just very that was a part of life, just like food or baseball. I thought I was going to be a New York Yankee when I was a kid. You imagine my disappointment and my mother's smile when she had to let me know, like, sweetie, I don't think you're going to be on the Yankees. You're 5'10". I don't think it's going to happen.
That's funny. So over the 10 years that you and your buddies have been doing this, it sounds like you've been playing with more or less the same guys throughout the recording journey that you've been doing. How have you and the band adapted to the marketing part of getting your music out there and the constant, even in this short 10-year period, the constant changes that are going on, like what we think we should be doing to get the music out there so people can enjoy it and we can keep living the dream, so to speak.
I don't think we've done much. I haven't done enough to master that. I mean, this album cycle is the most promotion that I've done on an album. And I'm never gonna make a TikTok. I just can't bring myself to do it. And I don't like the content creation part of it, like having to make sappy content just to be like, please listen to my music. I'd much rather focus on things like this and talking with people. I'm not trying to knock the TikTok thing, but I just can't do it personally. I'm willing to do that.
You don't feel it. What
No, I
about,
can't.
do you like doing live streaming at all for fans, or like audience, maybe reaching new fans like Facebook Live or whatever, YouTube Live or these other platforms? Have you done that, or have you thought about it?
I've done that, and I did that when the first time I noticed it before the pandemic, a couple of years before the pandemic. I was doing live streams on nights when I didn't have a gig, and I felt that itch to go perform. So I still highly recommend doing those, and I do them from time to time. Still, I just sit down and I'm like, man, I want to play some songs tonight, but I don't have a gig, so I find those work really well post pandemic as a good promo for what's coming up. Like, hey, I'm gonna play some songs, but this is coming up and this is coming up, and just keep it short. I think now, when it was the pandemic and before the pandemic, it was like an event. You know what I mean? Like the first
Mm.
couple lives I ever did, people were in the comment section and having a good time, and you know that part was great. The start of the pandemic, people were like, "Thank God for live streams," and so was I. And then as it wore on, I think most of us in the music world were like, "I can't wait to not do live streams anymore." And so maybe there's been a little bit of of just distance that I've put between me and live streams lately. I don't think that we musicians should be live streaming their show without good quality. I see the value in having good audio quality and live streaming a show for accessibility purposes. Like there's plenty of people who can't get to that show or they won't get to that show, and they should be able to come see it, just not every single show. There's something special about you had to be there.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think we need to kind of keep that closer to our chests as performers, because if everything's being documented and broadcasted, then the small moments when a small room, 100 people get together and have a great time because they're the only ones that are experiencing that together. I think that's important societally too.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so the album release show is going to be on May 28th. It actually drops on your birthday on May 11th. That's amazing. And please let me get this title right. Is it Northern Town?
Yes, it is.
Nice. How many songs?
10 tracks.
Amazing. What can fans and listeners of this show, or anyone who's might discover you soon, expect in the coming weeks with the album coming out from you and the band?
We are going back into the studio really soon and recording a bunch of singles. So there'll be singles coming out later in the summer. We're going to be up in Maine and throughout New Jersey for the majority of the summer. And so if anybody's up in those areas, let us know. But things are always subject to change quickly for us. So if you follow us on any of the socials and it's just Cranston Dean on any of those, you can stay up to date with any of the curveballs that we get thrown, and hopefully come out to any of those last minute things we get added to. You could also visit my website at cranstondean.com, and there's information there. But yeah, and whoever's listening that's an independent music maker out there, keep doing it. If you have that itch and that need to do it, just keep doing it. There's no reason that you should ever stop. Vincent van Gogh died thinking he was poor and unsuccessful, but he made great art his entire life. So just keep making art, keep making your art great. And we'll all see each other on the other side and go, man, it was a good painting you did.
That's great. I love that. Cranston, man, thanks a lot. It was good talking with you.
Thank you very much for having me, Roberto.
If you do not yet have a website for your music, check out Bandzoogle. It was created to help musicians and bands build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle features amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, tickets, and more, and it provides detailed fan data. Try it free at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Thank you again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of The Unstarving Musician, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave us feedback at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. I would love to hear from you. Find links for people and things mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love. If you're interested in starting a podcast but have been procrastinating, stick around for a couple more minutes because I want to tell you about Podcast Startup. It's a program I started working on months ago but didn't quite finish. Well, I'm putting the finishing touches on it as I record this for you. If you feel you need a little help getting your podcast started, Podcast Startup is for you. It's affordable, info-packed, and ideal for new podcasters. With Podcast Startup, you'll get an amazing step-by-step guide for getting started, lots of practical tips, and direct access to me for the unexpected, the deep questions, the I need a little more help kind of stuff related to podcasting. Look, I've published, recorded, and worked on over 275 podcast episodes. I'm constantly studying to improve my own game, and I want to start helping others start and sustain their own podcasts. Did you know that most podcasts don't make it past their first few episodes? That's right. They start, they stall, and then they die. Sustaining a podcast ain't easy. It's commitment. Poor planning and poor expectations are a recipe for a fast burnout and fade out for podcasters. This is exactly the kind of thing Podcast Startup was designed to help with. If you're intrigued, if you want to start a podcast the right way, go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to sign up for the beta launch. Wait, what? Beta launch? Yep. This is all new, and for a limited time, you can get a screaming deal on Podcast Startup. It'll always be well worth the price of admission, but the screaming deal is only available for a limited time. Go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to learn more. Start your podcast the right way with Podcast Startup by me and the Unstarving Musician. All right, one more time. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.